Hey, have you ever stopped to wonder what really makes a life count for something? We're about to jump into this ancient letter where the Apostle Paul gets into this really fierce debate about that exact question. It's a total clash over what's actually valuable versus what's just worthless. And believe it or not, it all kicks off with a pretty shocking warning. So Paul's writing this letter that is, for the most part, full of joy and talk of unity, and then bam, he drops this line, "Look out for the dogs." It's aggressive, it's intense, and it is absolutely meant to make you sit up and listen. You can almost hear the record scratch, right?
So the big question is, who on earth is he talking about? Who are these dogs and evildoers that have him so fired up? This isn't just some random outburst. He's responding to a very real and very serious threat.
And this brings us to our first major point. This isn't just a simple change in topic for Paul, it's a huge shift in his tone. He basically slams on the brakes to sound an alarm, and he does it with this rhetorical force that would have been absolutely impossible for the people reading it back then to ignore. Yeah, he is deliberately shifting gears here. He's going from a place of encouragement to this urgent call for vigilance, because he sees a danger that could completely undermine the foundation of their faith. He needs them to wake up and pay very, very close attention. Okay, so let's get into it. Who are these antagonists? Who are the people causing all this trouble? Paul isn't just being vague for effect. He has a very specific group of people in mind. The folks Paul is warning about were these traveling teachers. You'll often hear them called Judaizers. And what they would do is follow Paul from town to town, trying to correct his message. Their main argument was this: to be a true Christian, you first had to become culturally Jewish, and that specifically meant being circumcised and following all the Old Testament laws. So this is the absolute key to understanding the whole conflict. It's this phrase, confidence in the flesh. For these teachers, your standing with God depended on external stuff. Your heritage, your family tree, and, your ability to check off all the right boxes of religious rules. It was all about what you could do and who you were by birth.
And this just brings the whole conflict into crystal clear focus, doesn't it? On one side, you have this idea of faith plus your own works. And on the other, Paul's message, faith alone. One side is boasting in their resume. The other is boasting only in what Jesus has done. The stakes really couldn't be any higher.
Now, Paul doesn't just tear down their message. He offers this powerful, beautiful alternative. He completely redefines what the central mark of being a Christian even is. And what Paul does next, it's just brilliant. He takes their most important word, circumcision, and he completely flips it on its head. He's basically saying, you think you're the real deal because of some physical mark? No, we are the true circumcision. He's redefining the whole thing from an external act to an internal reality. And he breaks it down into these three things. True identity, he says, isn't about some ritual. It's about worshiping God in spirit, it's about boasting only in Jesus, and it's about completely letting go of any trust in your own accomplishments or your background. It's a total 180-degree shift in where you find your value. Okay, this is where the argument really hits its peak. Paul knows his opponents are obsessed with credentials, with resumes. So he decides, you know what, I'll play your game. Just to show them how completely pointless it is. He lays this incredible rhetorical trap. He essentially says, all right, you guys want to compare resumes? You want to talk about who has the most impressive background, the most amazing accomplishments? Fine. Let's play, because he knew that by their own standards, by their own rules, his resume was absolutely untouchable. He was about to beat them at their own game, and he knew it. Just look at this list. Every single point is a knockout punch. Circumcised on the 8th day, that's the perfect fulfillment of the law. Pure-blooded Israelite from the tribe of Benjamin, a super prestigious tribe that gave Israel its very first king. A Hebrew of Hebrews, meaning he was authentic through and through in language and culture. A Pharisee, the most respected and devout religious group of his day. And his zeal, his passion was so unmatched he was literally persecuting the church. And get this, by the standard of the law, he was seen as blameless. It's a perfect resume. There's no beating it. And then, the mic drop. After laying out this perfect, unbeatable resume, he says all of it. Every single accomplishment, every ounce of his heritage is not just worthless, he literally calls it rubbish compared to knowing Christ. He doesn't just win the game, he flips the entire game board over. And to really drive this point home, it's not just about his own story. Paul highlights someone else, a man who is the living, breathing embodiment of this selfless ideal.
So meet Epaphroditus. Now, he wasn't some famous theologian with an impressive resume. No, Paul presents him as a soldier, a comrade in arms who fought right alongside him, someone who proved his faith not with a list of credentials, but with his actions. Just notice the titles Paul gives him: brother, fellow worker, fellow soldier. These aren't titles of hierarchy, they're terms of partnership, of shared struggle. Paul valued him not for his background, but for his loyal service, right there in the trenches with him. And get this, Epaphroditus actually got so sick while he was serving Paul that he nearly died. He literally gambled with his own life, not for personal honor or glory, but in humble, obedient service to the cause. He's the perfect picture of putting no confidence in the flesh. So as we start to wrap this up, you can see Paul's brilliant strategy, right? He doesn't just tell the Philippians what to believe, he shows them. He gives them this kind of gallery of heroes to look up to and to imitate. And it creates this incredibly powerful picture. You've got Christ, the ultimate model of humility. You have Timothy, who shows genuine care for other people. You have Epaphroditus, who embodies self-sacrificial service. And then you have Paul himself, modeling what it looks like to count all those worldly credentials as a total loss. See, these are the resumes that actually matter. So, in the end, when you boil it all down, Paul's argument is that our true worth, the thing that really makes a life valuable, it's not found on a list of our achievements or our pedigree. It's found in a life that's poured out for others, in humble service that points away from us and towards something and someone much greater. And that, of course, leaves us with a pretty big question to think about. What are the modern-day versions of Paul's resume? You know, our job titles, our degrees, our social status, the things we've accomplished. And then the bigger question is, in the grand scheme of things, what are they truly worth?